Hello there and welcome to this space. My name is Nisi Ozibu and I am obsessed with how we show up as our most bold and relentless selves at work. Now, for those of you that are not aware, by profession, I am a change manager, and what that means is actually I support you in making that transition to where you are now to a future state the organization is trying to create. So sometimes it's changing jobs, sometimes it's a project. The transformation can come in various different shades, and I'm really interested and intrigued by actually how do we make these transitions in a way that is more healthy and wholesome. How can we gain insights from counselling, psychology and trauma specialists in kind of our personal spheres and bring that knowledge and expertise into the workplace so that we're able to lead with more compassion and empathy. So today I have Dr. Victoria Uwana and Dr. Kirsty Fleetwood Mead. They are the co-founders of the Untamed Collective, and they do some really awesome work in the space of counselling, psychology and helping people transition and fight imposter syndrome, all these amazing things. Anyway, I'm not going to steal their thunder. They will give their introduction. So without further ado, then we cut over to the conversation that we had on Zoom.
Yeah, hi. Feel free to call me Vicky. I'm a counselling psychologist. So is Kirsty. Well, she'll introduce herself, but we actually trained together. That's where we met. About 6 or 7 years ago now. So I'm a psychologist. I'm working in private practice and I work with individuals and couples as well. I like to say that my motto is I really want to help people have better relationships with themselves and with other people. So I do that. Do quite a few things. I also do coaching in the workplace, in the corporate sector, and that's around resilience and just general mental well-being. And myself and Kirsty have also recently set up the Untamed Collective, and that is also a bunch of things within itself. So we offer coaching for women specifically, and we also offer courses where we really teach women to be their best selves really, and just to bring down some of those barriers that are either self-imposed or placed on them by society or other people, so they can really live the life that they want to live, so live life untamed essentially. And so we're also trying to branch into the corporate sector as well and offer some of our packages for organizations.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Dr. Kirsty, do you want to give us an intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vicky has beautifully summarised our work together with the Untamed Collective, which we're both super passionate about. I think we both realised that we were seeing really similar presentations in our private practice. Women who struggled with imposter syndrome and feeling like they weren't good enough, and who essentially felt like they were holding themselves back from living their best lives. And so we're so passionate about offering the Untamed Collective, not only to help women feel like they can step outside of the box and really do the things that they want to be doing in their lives, but also to have that community aspect so they feel like they can learn from one another and lift each other up, and to feel like they're not the only ones. So that's something that we're both doing, that we both are really passionate about. And a little bit more about me and my background. So my background has been working in lots of different trauma services, both with adults, with veterans and with children and families. I now work exclusively in private practice. So I have my own private practice. I do corporate coaching as well as Vicky. And another slightly different thing that I have is I'm also a yoga teacher. So I'm actually really interested in the mind-body connection, and using movement and embodiment and different kind of breath practices as a way of thinking about ourselves holistically. So stepping out of our minds and into our bodies.
Great. So I wonder, I didn't say that I was going to bring this up, but I feel like this is great in terms of setting the context for today. Untamed Collective, what does being untamed mean to you?
Good question. I think for me, it's just living life according to my own values, to my own principles and my own standards. Shedding the feeling of I should be doing this, or I ought to be doing that, or I ought to be feeling this, or I ought to be this kind of person. It's just really living life according to my own values and principles. And I think for me, that was I really walked this out when I left my job within the NHS and went into solo private work. And there were so many things that were kind of clouding my mind. Can I do it? You know, will people pay me? You know, to work with them. You know, I just had this idea when I first qualified as what my career should have looked like. So it was really stepping out of the boat and saying, no, actually, but this is kind of who I am. This is how I can be my most authentic self. And, you know, I want to be free in order to carve out what I think my career should look like. So yeah, I think for me, that's what Untamed is, just living life according to your values. You know, what do you want out of life? Career, relationships. Great. How can we get you there?
Absolutely, definitely echo everything that Vicky said there. I think it's also feeling yourself when you have like that full body yes, and being free to go for those things, to do those things, to let those things take up space in your life. And equally at the same time to feel confident to put the boundaries in around things that you don't want to do. So Vicky was saying, you know, all those shoulds and those things that we feel like we ought to do, we ought to be, but having the confidence, I think, to say no to things, to say no to people, relationships, things that drain us, and to fully pursue the things that really energize us in our day-to-day life.
Absolutely. And that just really resonates with me because I think, as I said in my intro, I'm really kind of passionate about how we show up as our most kind of authentic and boundless selves. So kind of all within the same family as being Untamed. So that's powerful. Okay, so we did prepare a couple of things that we sort of said that we were going to talk about. And, you know, it's all about how we show up in the workplace and the impact that pandemic has had upon us as individuals. And I wanted to kind of get your expert opinion in terms of how should we be dealing with this corporately. So for those of you that are not aware, who have never kind of watched any of my videos before, I'm a business change manager, and my role is very much focused on helping people take a transition, and that transition can look come in various different ways. So it might be transition via a project, it might be transition because the definition of your role has changed, it might be a transition because the culture in the organization as a whole is changing, and as a result of the pandemic, that's what we've seen. Cultures in organizations as a whole are changing, and actually, how do we deal with this? How do we equip ourselves to make the most of this morning and show up as our most kind of powerful and authentic selves? But also, what can organizations corporately be doing to help people on the transition? So first of all, I just wanted to start with an intro in terms of, in your practice or in your practices, what are you seeing? What are you seeing in terms of how the pandemic has affected people? Are you seeing anything?
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of in the workplace, something that I've really noticed has been a huge trend is that people have felt that it's been really difficult, either as a manager or as someone who's part of a team, to feel connected to their team. And so working remotely, I think, has brought huge positives with it, but also huge challenges. And I think people have felt potentially quite isolated, and those conversations that you might call those like water cooler chats, those water cooler moments where you can bond with your team, but also just to ask questions more informally, have been lost. And so now conversations tend to be a lot more formal. You have to arrange phone calls or emails or a Teams meeting. And so I think that can really have a strain on your sense of yourself as being part of a wider team. I think that is definitely a challenge that I've seen that has cropped up in the corporate work that I do quite a lot.
Absolutely.
I've also had, yes, same as Kirsty. I've also experienced that. I've had some people share their concerns, more so women really, about returning to the hybrid working or working solely from home, and what this means for them in terms of career progression and visibility, and the importance of those water cooler chats and the importance of networking or just bumping into someone on your way to the lift or at the vending machine. we can't underestimate the importance of those. Having these kind of connections, being introduced to such and such person, it's just so much more fluid and natural when it was in person. And some people do have the option of going into work, and some people maybe don't. And what does that mean in terms of equal parity? Like, who will get prioritized for progression if they're not, if they're seen or unseen? So I think that's something that's been a concern for some people. Yeah, there's been lots. I think the pandemic has been really, it was almost like a culture shift within itself, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The whole pandemic and working from home. Some people really missed that debriefing time, moving from the office to their home. The commute was their time to process, to kind of let go of the stresses of the workday, and be ready to face their family when they got home. And now it's like, well, you just move from one room to the other, and people aren't necessarily taking time for themselves to just debrief and just kind of process and just let things go. You're walking through the next door, and you've got your kids, you need to cook dinner, your partner maybe that you need to attend to. So I think there have been lots of things that have been missed with working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I just wanted to add, I had another thought there. Essentially, I guess what I've noticed is that we now live where we work, and so those work life balance, although on the one hand people are saying that they're losing their the time you have to commute, and so you're gaining that time back, but actually what I've been hearing from people in the corporate world is that meetings have been creeping earlier and earlier and later, and filling in that time that normally would have been spent commuting. Maybe you would have had time to kind of catch up on emails or prepare yourself for the day, or equally kind of decompress, as Vicky was saying. And so I think the tendency can be that you feel like you need to maybe log on in the evenings, just send a few more emails, just try and catch up on that piece of work, because you don't have that separation. And I think that has the potential to have quite a massive impact on people's mental health and their emotional well-being and their stress levels, because you feel like you're never away from work, and actually you can end up getting sucked in and feeling like that once you started that, it's really hard to stop.
Absolutely. And so what's your response? Are there any sort of coping mechanisms or I don't know, well-being steps that people take in these instances? What's your response when people are coming to you with these things?
I think the first thing I say is make time for yourself, and don't see it as just something that you'll get to when you have time. I think it's a necessity. So if you did have a half-hour commute or an hour commute, make that put aside that time when the working day is done. Go out for a run, go out for a walk, read a book, journal, just do some like star jumps in your office. Do something to kind of mark the end of the day, and prepare yourself for the next slot of the day. That's the first thing I'd say. Make sure you are taking time for yourself, as well as putting the phone down. But I think this really plays into like perfectionists and people who have a high anxiety about performance and high standards, because like Kirsty was saying, the temptation is there to just carry on working and just to do a few more iterations and just prepare a little bit more, but actually it's kind of perpetuating the cycle. It's not helping you. It's perpetuating the anxiety. It's perpetuating the feeling of perfectionism and having really high standards for yourself. So it's really important to take a break and actually let work go, and kind of see the separation between your worth isn't determined by your work. It's not determined by the output. Your worth is completely separate to the things that you do. So those are some of the things that I suggest.
Those rituals are so important, aren't they? I always have conversations when we're looking at any change program, and when we're looking at kind of transforming culture. It's actually what are you doing every single day? And it might be, okay, I'm just going to do a couple more edits of this. I'm only going to do it today, and then it becomes tomorrow and the day after, and before you don't know it, you've created this ritual around not knowing when to log off and not knowing when to put those boundaries in place. So one of the kind of things that I'm always pushing for is actually, what are the little seemingly mindless things that we can put into place daily, because that's what makes us who we are. It's not the grand things that we do once in a while, okay, I went for a 2-hour run and it's the only time I've gone once in 4 months. Okay, great, that's an achievement. That doesn't make you a runner. And that doesn't mean that you've established healthy boundaries. So I really like that point around rituals. And you laughed at the star jumps, but it does kind of delineate between you're working, now I'm shaking my body up like physically, and moving into the next phase of my day, whether it's spending time with my family, my dog, my cat, and whatever that looks like. And from you, Dr. Kirsty?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also thinking of this idea of boundaries, and just having a really clear idea of, what are your boundaries? What is that going to look like? Is it going to be, logging off at 5 or 6, or a time that feels comfortable for you? I think it's so important to have that idea in your mind and then to stick to it. But I think the way that we stick to it is by having a really clear why. So why are we keeping that boundary in place? So it's all very well in my coaching work saying to clients, I really don't think that you should be checking your emails at 9-10 o'clock at night. I can come in and say that, but if they don't agree with me, if they're not on board with that, then they're not going to change their behavior. The way that we change our behaviors is having a really clear motivation. So if your why is that actually you want to reduce your stress levels, you want to have time for yourself so that you can go for a run regularly, or you want to make sure that you have that meaningful time to connect with your partner or with your family, then I think holding those things in mind helps you to actually log off and to stop working, and to maintain those boundaries, to say no to those meetings that just get dropped into your calendar for 6:30 or whatever it is. So having reminders of your why can also be really helpful, whether that's a kind of a picture of your family in your office, or even just a little post-it note reminding you to log off and go for a run, or having your trainers next to you. So I think that can be really helpful. But the other thing that I'm thinking of is these are things that we can do on a personal level, but from an organizational level, I think this is something that managers and HR should really be thinking about, because I think quite often Vicky and I both work with a lot of managers and corporate executives, senior executives, and people who work really, really hard. And what can happen is they tend to be working all hours. They're responding to their direct reports at all hours, and they're saying to them, actually, we don't expect you to be replying to these emails. But then the tendency is still there that if that's an organizational approach that is happening, there's lots of late hour working. More junior members of staff are going to feel that anxiety that actually they need to do the same in order to progress and to be seen like they're working hard enough. So I think there's both. There's things that you can do on a personal level, but there's also organizational things we can be more mindful about ensuring that people have breaks and have proper boundaries around their work and the expectations around the amount of hours that people are working.
Absolutely. And on that point on organizational, and we'll probably end on this point. So blue sky thinking, you are the boss of the world, and you can mandate that organizations absolutely have to work in these ways to safeguard the well-being of their employees. What's one thing that you would mandate?
That's a tough one. One thing.
One thing. What's the domino? What's the thing that pushes that domino of safeguarding wellness?
I think for me it is around, as I was saying, this expectation of the hours that you should be working, and the amount that gets put into your diary. Because I think organizations can say, we really need you to take breaks and to look after yourself. But actually, if work just keeps piling up, then of course you're not going to be able to do that. So I think having really clear boundaries around, how many hours people should be doing, and logging off, and then just helping people to acknowledge, actually, yes, there's always going to be more to do, but you can work all the hours of the day and there's still going to be more to do. So actually just knowing when something's good enough is enough, and just making sure that they look after themselves, I think is really important for employers to be highlighting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that it's important for organizations and leaders to really share the vision and to really communicate what is it we're going for, what are we aiming for, what are our expectations, like Kirsty was saying earlier. How can we get there? How can we, with your skill set, with your personality traits, with your strengths, this is why you're important. I think that's really important because it kind of shapes the culture and it lets people really buy into what we're about, and it kind of unites the team. And so everyone can kind of take ownership for what they're doing, but also knowing that, knowing when enough is enough.
Of course. Yeah.
So rather than thinking about, okay, we just need to be productivity based and we need to be just thinking about the output and the results. No, let's share why we're doing this. Let's share why what we're doing is actually important, because then people are more invested. They can buy in and they also feel like they're important. So I think then when people know that they're important to an organisation and to its aims, I think they're more likely to work smarter rather than harder. They'll know that they're valued, so they don't have to keep working and being like the hamster around the wheel. So I think that also helps people to take care of themselves and also to communicate a message that we value this mission and we also value you. I think that's something that I would encourage organizations to really disseminate, that and share that you're valued and the work is valuable as well.
Absolutely.
I really love that, Vicky. I just really love that idea, and it just made me think that actually being aligned to your values and also feeling in control of your day-to-day work, so you know what you're doing and that people trust you to know what you're doing. The research has shown that actually that's a key factor for avoiding burnout. So yeah, I really love that idea.
Absolutely. And I guess the golden thread between the two things that you've both mentioned is come back around again to boundaries, so boundaries around work time, but then also boundaries in terms of what you are permitting yourself to do and not. And the reason why I say that is I found I get the most stressed when I'm working at something that I don't believe in and that I don't want to do, and that I'm just doing it because somebody else has told me to. And actually, the clearer organizations can get in terms of their why. I know Dr. Kirsty, you'd mentioned earlier about the why. The clearer they can get about their why allows us as empowered individuals to decide, is this the why for me? Because if it's not, everything else, like there's no point, it doesn't, there's nobody that can talk you into a why. You have to personally decide that for yourself. And I guess that's how we get our power. That's what enables us. And actually we're coming back full circle again, Dr. Victoria, in terms of like your why, and when you were leaving the NHS and feeling like, can I do this? And there's just so many things. I think it's absolutely fundamental in terms of our decision making in our professional and personal lives. So powerful. Great. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this mini chat with you both. Any final words of wisdom that you want to leave for anybody listening?
I know, Kirsty.
I guess just coming back to what we were sharing at the beginning, any words of wisdom for people listening? Don't be afraid to live that untamed life, like finding your values, aligning with what you really want to do, making sure that you have your why and going for it.
And I think mine would be to really get clear on who you are. So another full circle moment. Get clear on who you are, what motivates you, what drives you, what's important for you. Because once you know that, you'll then be able to take the steps and move in the direction that you want to go in.
Absolutely. And where can people find out more about you? So there's several services that you've mentioned that you offer, corporate organizations. Where can they find out more?
So you can find us at Untamed at theuntamenedcollective.com. You can find out more about our services there in terms of the work we do with women individually, but also corporately. And if people are looking for a couples therapist or just a therapist for themselves, you can find me at drvicky.co.uk.
And you can also find us on our Instagram at the Untamed Collective on IG. And for my personal private practice, I'm the yogipsychologist.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we will leave it there. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.